Get those ugly crutches out of my parade. Patricia screamed at 8-year-old Grace, then smashed her bright pink crutches on concrete. The disabled girl collapsed crying, "Daddy, I can't walk," as her decorated mobility aids shattered. Patricia didn't know Grace's father was the county sheriff watching everything unfold. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Patricia Daniels screamed as she marched toward 8-year-old Grace Thompson, who was standing proudly in her school's Memorial Day parade formation. Grace had been born with cerebral palsy and relied on her bright pink crutches to walk, but today she was beaming with joy as she prepared to march with her classmates. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Daniels," Grace said softly, her small voice trembling. "I'm just trying to be in the parade with my friends." "You're ruining everything," Patricia shrieked, her face red with rage. "This is supposed to be a beautiful parade, not a freak show. Nobody wants to see a crippled kid hobbling around on those disgusting sticks." Sheriff Jake Thompson was standing in the crowd, watching his daughter participate in her first school parade. As the county sheriff, he was there in uniform to provide security, but more importantly, he was there as a proud father. What he heard next made his blood turn to ice. "Please don't call me that," Grace whispered, tears forming in her innocent brown eyes. "My crutches help me walk. I can't help that I need them." "Well, maybe you shouldn't be in a public parade if you can't walk like a normal child," Patricia snarled. "You're making this whole event look pathetic." Grace began crying softly. "But I practiced so hard. I learned all the songs and movements. I just want to march with my class." "I don't care what you want," Patricia snapped. "This is my neighborhood's parade, and I won't have it ruined by some disabled brat who can't keep up." Sheriff Thompson pushed through the crowd, his jaw clenched with fury. Patricia Daniels had been a thorn in his side for months with her ridiculous HOA complaints, but he had no idea she was capable of such cruelty toward children. "Mrs. Daniels, please step away from my daughter," Jake said, his voice deadly quiet. "Your daughter?" Patricia laughed cruelly. "Well, that explains a lot. You raised a defective child who thinks she belongs in normal activities." Jake felt something dangerous building in his chest. "Grace is perfect exactly as she is." "Perfect?" Patricia screeched. "She's a cripple. She doesn't belong in this parade, making everyone uncomfortable. Look at those hideous crutches, they're ruining all my photos." Grace looked up at her father with heartbroken eyes. "Daddy, am I really defective?" Before Jake could answer, Patricia made the worst mistake of her life. "You know what? I'm tired of looking at those ugly things," Patricia said with a twisted smile. She grabbed Grace's crutches and, with shocking violence, smashed them against the concrete sidewalk. Crack, snap. The bright pink crutches that Grace had decorated with rainbow stickers shattered into pieces. Grace immediately collapsed to the ground, unable to stand without her mobility aids. "Daddy!" Grace screamed as she fell, her small body hitting the pavement hard. "My crutches. She broke my crutches." The entire parade came to a stunned halt as people witnessed Patricia's shocking attack on a disabled child. Parents gasped in horror, children began crying, and several people started recording with their phones. "There," Patricia said with satisfaction. "Now maybe you'll learn to keep your crippled kid at home where she belongs." Grace was sobbing on the ground, trying to crawl toward her father. "Daddy, I can't get up. I can't walk without my crutches." Jake knelt beside his daughter, gathering her trembling body in his arms. The sight of his brave little girl crying on the sidewalk surrounded by the broken pieces of her mobility aids was more than he could bear. "It's okay, sweetheart," Jake whispered, his own voice breaking. "Daddy's here." "But my crutches are broken," Grace wept. "How will I walk? How will I go to school? How will I play with my friends?" Patricia stood over them with no trace of remorse. "Maybe this will teach you both that disabled freaks don't belong in public events." That was the moment Sheriff Jake Thompson decided that Patricia Daniels had just made the biggest mistake of her life. "Patricia Daniels," Jake said, standing up slowly and revealing his sheriff's badge for the first time, "you're under arrest for assault on a disabled child, destruction of medical equipment, and child abuse." Patricia's arrogant smile faded as she realized who she was dealing with. "Sheriff? But you're just a parent here." "I'm Grace's father first," Jake said coldly, "and the county sheriff second. You just committed multiple felonies in front of dozens of witnesses." Jake radioed for backup and an ambulance while other parents comforted Grace. Within minutes, patrol cars and paramedics arrived at the scene. "I was just maintaining community standards," Patricia protested as Jake handcuffed her. "That crippled kid was ruining our parade." You destroyed the mobility equipment of a disabled child, Jake replied. That's a federal hate crime. The paramedics carefully examined Grace for injuries while Jake explained what had happened. Grace had scraped her knees when she fell, but more seriously, she was traumatized and unable to walk without her crutches. Daddy, Grace whispered as the paramedics treated her scrapes, why did that lady hate me so much? I was just trying to be in the parade like everyone else. Jake's heart shattered hearing his daughter blame herself. She doesn't hate you, sweetheart. She's just a very sick person who doesn't understand how special and wonderful you are. But she called me defective and said I don't belong with normal kids. Grace, listen to me, Jake said, kneeling to her eye level. You are not defective. You are not broken. You are perfect exactly as you are. Your crutches don't make you different in a bad way, they help you be independent and strong. The school principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, approached with tears in her eyes. Sheriff Thompson, I am so sorry this happened to Grace. She's one of our brightest and most determined students. Thank you, Jake replied. Grace was so excited about this parade. She's been practicing for weeks. Mrs. Rodriguez turned to Grace. Sweetie, would you like to still be in the parade? We can get you a wheelchair from the school or your daddy could carry you. Grace's face lit up despite her tears. Really? I can still march with my class. Of course. You earned your place in this parade, and no mean person can take that away from you. Meanwhile, Patricia was being loaded into a patrol car, still protesting her innocence. This is ridiculous. I was protecting the community from having to see disabled freaks. The crowd of parents and children watched in disgust as Patricia was driven away. Many of them approached Jake and Grace to offer support and condolences. Sheriff Thompson, said Mrs. Martinez, another parent, I've recorded everything that happened. That woman's attack on Grace was completely unprovoked and vicious. Thank you, Jake replied. We'll need all the witness statements we can get. Grace ended up completing the parade in a wheelchair borrowed from the school, with her classmates surrounding her protectively. The other children had decorated the wheelchair with flowers and ribbons, making Grace feel like a princess despite everything that had happened. Look, Daddy, Grace called out as she rolled past. I'm still in the parade. Mrs. Daniels couldn't stop me. Jake watched with pride and heartbreak as his brave daughter refused to let Patricia's cruelty destroy her special day. Grace waved to the crowd, sang the patriotic songs, and smiled through her tears. The investigation into Patricia's attack revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior. She had been harassing families with disabled children throughout the neighborhood for years. The Chen family came forward to report that Patricia had repeatedly called their autistic son retarded, and demanded they keep him inside during community events. The Williams family revealed that Patricia had tried to ban their daughter's service dog from the neighborhood pool, claiming it was unsanitary to have animals where normal people swim. The elderly Johnson couple testified that Patricia had screamed at Mr. Johnson for using a walker, saying it made the neighborhood look like a nursing home. Pattern after pattern emerged of Patricia targeting the most vulnerable residents, disabled children, elderly people with mobility aids, families dealing with medical challenges. She had been running a campaign of hatred against anyone she deemed imperfect. During her interrogation, Patricia showed no remorse for destroying Grace's crutches or making her fall. That kid shouldn't have been in the parade, Patricia said coldly. Disabled children make normal people uncomfortable. They bring down property values and ruin community events. So you decided to attack an 8-year-old? Detective Martinez asked. I was sending a message, Patricia replied without emotion. Keep your defective kids at home where they belong. The detective struggled to maintain professional composure. Mrs. Daniels, you destroyed the mobility equipment of a disabled child during a school event. You made her fall and called her degrading names. Patricia shrugged. Maybe her parents will finally understand that some kids aren't meant for public activities. Even seasoned investigators were shocked by Patricia's complete lack of empathy. She genuinely believed that disabled children didn't deserve to participate in community events. At home that evening, Grace sat on her bed looking at the broken pieces of her crutches. Jake had brought them home so they could see if anything could be salvaged. Daddy, can my crutches be fixed? Grace asked hopefully. Jake examined the shattered metal and plastic. I don't think so, sweetheart. But we'll get you new ones that are even better. But I decorated these myself, Grace said, touching a surviving rainbow sticker. They were special. I know, baby. I know how much they meant to you. Grace was quiet for a moment, then asked, Daddy, why do some people hate kids like me? Jake sat beside his daughter, choosing his words carefully. Some people are afraid of things they don't understand. Instead of learning and growing, they choose to be mean and hurtful. But I'm not scary. I'm just a regular kid who needs help walking. You're absolutely right, Jake said, pulling her close. You are a regular kid, a smart, funny, brave, wonderful kid who happens to use crutches. There's nothing wrong with that. Will that lady go to jail? Yes, she will. What she did to you was against the law, and she'll have to face the consequences. Grace nodded thoughtfully. I hope she learns to be nicer to kids like me while she's there. Jake marveled at his daughter's capacity for forgiveness even after such a traumatic experience. Patricia's trial became a local sensation. The community rallied around Grace and her family, with dozens of people attending court proceedings to show support. The evidence against Patricia was overwhelming. Security footage from the parade, witness statements from dozens of parents and children, and her own recorded confession made conviction inevitable. But the most powerful testimony came from Grace herself. The brave 8-year-old took the witness stand with her new purple crutches decorated with butterfly stickers. In a clear, strong voice, she told the court what Patricia had done to her. She said I was defective and didn't belong in the parade, Grace testified. She said my crutches were ugly and disgusting. Then she broke them and made me fall down. The prosecutor asked gently, "How did that make you feel, Grace?" "It made me very sad," Grace replied. "I just wanted to march with my friends. I practiced really hard and learned all the songs. I didn't understand why she was so mean to me." "Are you afraid of Mrs. Daniels now?" Grace thought for a moment. "I'm not afraid of her anymore because my daddy caught her and she can't hurt kids now. But I feel sorry for her because she must be very unhappy inside to want to hurt children." Grace's innocent wisdom brought tears to the eyes of everyone in the courtroom, including several jurors. Judge Patricia Morrison, who ironically shared a first name with the defendant, addressed Patricia directly during sentencing. "Mrs. Daniels, in my 25 years on the bench, I have rarely encountered such callous disregard for a child's dignity and well-being. You attacked an 8-year-old girl because she uses mobility aids. You destroyed her crutches, caused her to fall, and psychologically traumatized her during what should have been a joyful school event. Your actions weren't about maintaining community standards. They were about your own prejudice and hatred toward disabled individuals. You targeted a vulnerable child because you thought she was an easy victim." The judge paused, looking directly at Patricia. "You were wrong. Grace Thompson is not a victim, she's a survivor. Despite your cruelty, she completed her parade, forgave your actions, and testified with remarkable courage and grace. Therefore, I sentence you to 5 years in state prison and order you to pay $50,000 in restitution to the Thompson family for medical expenses, new mobility equipment, and trauma counseling." Patricia's face crumpled as the sentence was announced. 5 years? But I was just trying to maintain a nice community. You attacked a disabled child, Judge Morrison replied firmly. You're fortunate this court doesn't have authority to impose a harsher sentence. As Patricia was led away in handcuffs, she looked back at Grace with hatred still burning in her eyes. Even facing prison time, she felt no remorse for what she had done to an innocent child. The news of Patricia's conviction made regional headlines. HOA president gets 5 years for attacking disabled child, read newspapers throughout the state. The story sparked conversations about discrimination against disabled individuals and the importance of protecting children from hatred and bullying. The state legislature passed new legislation nicknamed Grace's Law, which established special penalties for attacks on disabled children's mobility equipment and created funding for replacement devices when they're damaged or destroyed. Meanwhile, the Maple Ridge neighborhood underwent a complete transformation. With Patricia gone, the community came together to support families with disabled members. The new HOA board, elected immediately after Patricia's conviction, consisted of parents and advocates who understood the importance of inclusion. Their first act was to install accessibility features throughout the neighborhood. Neighbors organized fundraisers to help families with disabled children access necessary equipment and services. The Thompson family received donations to create an accessible playground in their backyard where Grace could safely play with friends. The school district also made changes, implementing strict anti-bullying policies specifically protecting disabled students and requiring staff training on inclusion and disability awareness. Grace became a beloved figure in both her school and neighborhood. Her resilience and forgiveness inspired children and adults alike to be more accepting and kind. "Grace shows my kids that everyone deserves respect and friendship," said Mrs. Martinez, whose son was in Grace's class. "She teaches them that differences make us stronger, not weaker." 6 months after the attack, Grace was invited to speak at a disability rights conference for children. Standing confidently with her purple butterfly crutches, she addressed an audience of kids and families dealing with similar challenges. "Sometimes people are mean because they don't understand," Grace said, her voice clear and strong. "But that doesn't mean we should hide or be ashamed. Our wheelchairs, crutches, and other helpers make us special, not different in a bad way. When someone is mean to you because you're disabled, remember that the problem is in their heart, not in your body. Keep being brave, keep being yourself, and keep showing the world how amazing you are." The audience gave Grace a standing ovation, many people wiping away tears at her words of wisdom and courage. In prison, Patricia faced a harsh reality that grew worse each day. Her crimes against a disabled child had made her infamous among inmates, who had their own code of justice when it came to people who hurt children. She spent most of her time in protective custody, isolated and despised by everyone around her. The woman who had once controlled neighborhood activities now couldn't even control her own daily routine. Patricia's husband divorced her within a year of her conviction, taking their teenage children and moving to another city. They changed their last name and refused all contact with Patricia. Her former friends and neighbors wanted nothing to do with the woman who had attacked a disabled child at a school parade. The social status she had valued above human decency was gone forever. Patricia tried writing letters of apology to Grace and her family, but they were all returned unopened. The Thompsons had moved forward with their lives and didn't want reminders of Patricia's cruelty. Meanwhile, Grace continued to thrive. She joined her school student council, started a buddy program pairing disabled and non-disabled students, and became a mentor for younger children with mobility challenges. "My crutches don't limit me," Grace would tell other kids. "They help me go wherever I want to go and do whatever I want to do. The only limits are the ones we put on ourselves." On the 2-year anniversary of the parade incident, the school held a special celebration of inclusion and diversity. Grace was the guest of honor, recognized for her courage and advocacy work. As she addressed the crowd of students, parents, and community members, Grace spoke about forgiveness, growth, and the power of kindness. "2 years ago, someone tried to hurt me because I was different," Grace said, standing tall with her crutches beside her. "But look at what our school and community have become. We've learned that our differences make us stronger, not weaker. I forgave Mrs. Daniels a long time ago, not because what she did was okay, but because carrying anger would have hurt me more than it hurt her. She's in prison paying for her choices, but I'm here living my life surrounded by friends who accept and celebrate who I am." The crowd erupted in applause, giving Grace the recognition she deserved for turning trauma into triumph. Sheriff Jake Thompson watched his daughter with immense pride. Patricia thought she could break Grace's spirit by destroying her crutches, he reflected. Instead, she made Grace stronger and inspired an entire community to be more inclusive and compassionate. Grace faced the worst of human cruelty and responded with the best of human kindness. She taught us all that true strength comes not from tearing others down, but from lifting them up. As for Patricia Daniels, she remained in prison, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what she had done. She had tried to destroy a child's confidence and joy because of her own prejudice and hatred. The woman who had once wielded power over an entire neighborhood now lived in a small cell, forgotten by the world except as a cautionary tale about the consequences of targeting innocent children. Grace Thompson had survived Patricia's attack and grown up to make the world a better place for disabled children everywhere. Patricia had lost everything: her freedom, her family, her reputation, and her future, because she couldn't accept that a little girl with crutches deserved the same respect and opportunities as any other child. In the end, love had triumphed over hate, inclusion had conquered prejudice, and a brave little girl had shown the world that true strength comes from embracing our differences rather than attacking them. The story that began with Patricia's scream of hatred had ended with Grace's message of hope and acceptance. Justice had been served, lessons had been learned, and a community had been transformed. Patricia Daniels' name would be remembered only as a symbol of what happens when prejudice and cruelty target innocent children. But Grace Thompson's name would be remembered as a symbol of resilience, forgiveness, and the unbreakable human spirit that refuses to be diminished by hatred. The little girl who had been attacked for being different had grown up to celebrate those differences and protect other children from experiencing the pain and trauma she had endured. And somewhere in a prison cell, Patricia finally understood that the real disability had never been Grace's need for crutches. The real disability had been Patricia's inability to see the beauty, strength, and worth in every child, regardless of their physical challenges. That lesson had cost her everything, but it was a lesson the world needed to learn. And thanks to brave Grace Thompson, it was a lesson that would never be forgotten.